Welcome back to OnChain Revolution. My name is Yagobi, and I am your host for the show. We have a action-packed hour of show today for you guys, but before we get into anything like that, help us out by subscribing to our YouTube channel, hitting the like, and also following us on our X handle as well, which is at OnChain Rev. And do me an extra favor, because I did have to restart my personal X. If you could follow me at Yagobiverse, that would be a huge help. But today's the day. Today is the big day, the Fed meeting, the FOMC. I've been mentioning that a lot of volatility is expected. That is what I'm expecting for sure. Does Powell actually be genuine about how he feels about the current market? Does he hold resentment towards this administration currently? And will he show that in his statements, right? And that's the big question. And so for me personally, I do think that he's going to say some hawkish things. So I do expect volatility up and down after the Fed meeting, by the way, which is at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central. And we will see. We all know that the rate cut has a 1% chance. So that is pretty much not going to happen, right? And so the markets seem to be really they seem to be okay with, what the expectation is. And if you take a look here, you can see that the S&P really doesn't have any change. It is in the green, barely slightly up. The NASDAQ is up almost half a point. And then you see the Dixie actually rebounding today. So the dollar, which is something else we're going to get into, is up a bit. And then you can go down to Bitcoin and the crypto markets, and they're actually not bad. If you take a look here, Bitcoin is slightly up. Ethereum is actually taking a hit. It's down almost a point there. Well, 7.71%, right? So everything else, of course, precious metals are thriving. You see gold up and silver up as well. But yeah, we're going to get deeper into this, but we're going to talk about some other stuff down the line as well. Obviously, we'll continue to talk on the FOMC meeting. We're going to talk about Bitcoin and how it's done against all asset classes over, when you zoom out, and it's done extremely well. And most of us know that, but, there's reasons to continually have confidence in Bitcoin. And we talked a little bit about that yesterday when we hit on Tether, and there's some more information about Tether that I didn't know. But I think you guys would be bullish on Bitcoin once we go over that. Also, we'll hit on some smart contracts that are coming on chain for Ethereum to give AI agents almost kind of like this credit score, which I think could be a really good thing. Some people don't think that it could be a good thing because it's going to be saturated with a ton of AI bots eventually. But, having a single standard that everybody looks to could definitely help, and we'll get into that later as well. Fidelity launching a stable coin, that is really big for the future when you talk about infrastructure for crypto. And then we're going to talk about some fun stuff in the degen sector. Speaking about the ERC 8004s for the autonomous agents, there's a couple agents that got launched on Ethereum but launched coins on Base, and they are pretty hot topics right now. One of them is Claude, and I believe the other is Ember, and we'll get deeper into that. Of course, that is more on the speculative, risky area of the space, but definitely fun, and they're doing some crazy things there, right? So we'll dive into that as we get further into the hour. But going back to the FOMC volatility, right? We're looking at Bitcoin here, and we see that Bitcoin on the hour chart really had this extended push out. And I really do believe that yesterday's push up for price was a setup, right? For a lot of these traders to kind of, that might be more a new trader, not as experienced, be kind of sucked into those longs. And we are seeing some pullback this morning happen, at least within the last 3 hours, right? So what do I expect? I actually expect more volatility. I expect before that 2 p.m. meeting that we'll see probably Bitcoin start to rise back up. And then the announcement will be made. And, of course, there won't be any cut. It'll just be a continuation of the pause. And then I think we'll probably see some crash down during Jay Powell's speech afterwards. But he could surprise us, right? Jay Powell could surprise us and give us, some dovish talk. I don't think that's a high probability, but it could be, something that happens. And if it does, and expect the markets to respond accordingly, right? So I see some comments here in the chat. We got Tim Baker. He says, "You never called me." Yeah, Tim, last year was definitely a hectic year. Reach back out to me in Telegram and we'll connect for sure. Jason Sinkar, big XDC, I believe, fan here. He says, "Good morning." And then we got Mogart the Great, which says, "Same. We are going to see Powell Hawkins." Yeah, I agree. I think that's probably what's going to happen here. But yeah, so kind of getting back to, with the anticipation here, right? You see, basically, it's going to be volatile until we get to that rate cut time. And the weird thing about the crypto markets right now is Bitcoin's barely in that green on the day, but then Ethereum, if we take a look there, Ethereum is down almost a full point, like I mentioned before, right? And we bring this up here, and you can see it's been in sell pressure territory for quite some time here. Right. So I'm just kind of curious of why Ethereum is seeing more of a downtrend than Bitcoin, but nevertheless, they will all follow the same trajectory if Powell does get hawkish here. But yeah, welcome everybody that's jumping into the chat here. Put all of your comments and questions in the chat, and I will get to them eventually here. But also, like I mentioned, please like and share the space on the X side, and then on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. That helps us out a ton. All right, let's get into some of these topics that we're going to go over today. Kind of getting into, since we're right here, in the charts, I'm seeing a lot of spaces on X talking about the dollar collapsing. And the DXY is actually, kind of it's interesting because it did show yesterday. I believe this is it right here. Yeah. Yesterday, the daily candle was a huge pullback, right? And you can see it went from 97.31 all the way down to 95.5, right? And then you did see a rebound today, which makes sense. I mean, like, we've had some pretty strong pull downs, right? And so for today, for it to pull back up, I'm not too shocked. Now, what is this green line that I have here? This green line is a threshold. Let me reset this. Is a threshold that we've created on the show to kind of show when it breaks below this green line threshold. And if it gets to the circled area, technically that's when alt season starts. And I know that we've all accepted that we're in a bear market, right? But that doesn't mean that this bear market that we're in right now isn't going to be different than previous bear markets. Because if you look at the previous cycles, 2025, which is a post-halving year, was definitely different than any other post-halving year whenever you talk about not having the euphoria and alt season not hitting, right? So let's say that the bear market started October 10th, whenever we had the largest liquidation in crypto ever, and it's been going on since then. You're talking about November, December, January, so about 3 months. And if the dollar finds its way down into this area, getting close to March, and we already talked yesterday about how the global liquidity is starting to tick up, and the Russell 2000s following it. And if Ethereum follows afterwards, we could definitely see that situation. So it's still, in my opinion, in play to have some sort of push up for Ethereum towards the end of February, beginning of March, but we shall see how that plays out. ASAP Benji, what is up? And then Courtney Johnson says, "Peace, bro. Why is Merlin dropping so hard?" So I missed your comment yesterday, Courtney, and I apologize. I actually saw afterwards, but Merlin's actually going through a little bit of a process right now, kind of handling the vested schedule releases from some early investors and things like that. It's not anything, in my personal opinion, that you need to freak out about or worry about. Merlin and Jeff and his team have been in situations to where the price has fluctuated back and forth before, and that's kind of the overall crypto market right now, especially with alts, right? But you got to look at the kind of zoomed out accomplishments. Getting on Kraken, they're on there for spot and perps, and then they just got listed on Coinbase for perps about a month and a half ago. That's not saying that everything's going to be perfect eventually or anything like that, but me personally, I have confidence that they are going to rebound once the market starts to pick back up. So hopefully that answers your question there. All right, let's get back to it here. Definitely get a drink of water. All right, so yeah, going back to the DXY. Here's the situation I'm looking at. Okay, so today's rebound, you see here, with this green candle today. So does this get built on top of? Does it, do we have a continuation with this? And does it end the day with a strong green candle? I think that's very important as well. Because as you see, the downtrend on the daily chart for the dollar, the DXY, has been a pretty strong downtrend. Now, does this start an uptrend? If it does, then, I think we need to probably pause a bit and say, okay, well, let's keep looking at this, because the DXY, one thing that has been constant is it does venture into this area for alts to really thrive, right? And so that's definitely something that we are paying attention to. And hopefully it does break down below this, but we need, persistent momentum for it to really work its way down here. And if it does, I imagine that's probably not going to happen until at least mid-February. But you got to also remember, this seems to be a part of this administration's goal, is to, for lack of a better phrase, crash the dollar and really put more importance on Bitcoin as, that's kind of, a lot of speculation of being the strategy to eliminate a lot of the debt that the U.S. has currently. But welcome to all the new people joining in the chat. What's up, Justin Garreau? Top of the morning, back to you, sir. But all right, let's see what else we got here. The crypto and price action today, we can hit on it lightly. We touched on it earlier, but I feel like it's not necessarily pointless, but I do think it's going to be volatile for, as we get to the 2 p.m. Eastern time for the Fed decision, which that's not really going to affect as much, I don't think. It's going to be more of the post decision and interview that the reporters have with Jay Powell, right? And so anyways, if you are trying to get a gauge of the market, even though you are expecting volatility, what I would say is you have an extension of the buy pressure for Bitcoin on the hour chart, right? And it looks like that closed up. So that extension closed up. And so it looks like it's going into sell pressure. And you can tell as well from these 3-hour candles here. Me personally, if this has a continuation of strength to the downside for the sell pressure, I actually think it reverses before, probably during the decision and before Jay Powell gets to speak, because that's whenever I think things will get pretty crazy in terms of volatility and wildness of Bitcoin and really the overall markets, right? Because it's the one thing I will say, it has shown strength to the upside in general since yesterday. But I feel like that is definitely a trap personally, because volatility is expected. And then if you go to the 4-hour, this as well, the 4-hour, does show that we're still in buy pressure session, but this actually could extend out a little bit further, and then the volatility kind of mess with it. And if it does, because there will be a decision of which direction the price will start to go in. And if the decision is down because people feel bearish about the hawkish comments that Jay Powell could make, then this will come out of the buy pressure on the 4-hour as well. But remember, guys, the volatility is only correlated. It only matters for the interview, and then there's always a certain amount of time post-interview where the direction of the price action decides which way it wants to go. And I wouldn't be shocked if it decided to continue on, right? Because if you look at the daily chart here, and this is more of I think a clear picture that you can get, is the daily chart has been is starting to crack with the sell pressure for Bitcoin, right? And if the comments aren't too bad, and let's say people are trying to figure out which direction it's going to go, and it starts to you get over that volatility, this could start to close up, right? And if it does, then we could see a rebound from the volatility tomorrow, heading into the weekend. And even if we don't get an aggressive push up to the weekend, and this starts to just kind of go a little sideways on the daily chart, but not bleed out because people are kind of over the volatility at that point, we could start to see this close up for the beginning of next week. And the Sunday weekly candle could be a big one. And then we start to see this go into the midsection and then up, and then we go into a buy pressure session. So that is definitely on the table. And then that would play perfectly into the weekly chart here that I feel like has been overdue, because you go back to August, really when the started of 2025 for Bitcoin's weekly chart of being in sell pressure and being down and oversold as well for a very, very long time. Now we are out of oversold on the stochastics right now, but we're not out of the sell pressure for Bitcoin on the weekly. But this plays out then that mid to late February situation that I was talking about with the global liquidity, the Russell, Ethereum, and then Bitcoin. Obviously, they would all join the party together to the upside. Yo, Axie Made, what is up? Good morning. And then we got Mr. Sheedy. Sheedy, thank you for joining. Appreciate you guys. Please share the space on X, and love to have you guys back, man. It's awesome. We're gonna get into some Bitcoin ecosystem stuff for sure later down the line. We're gonna probably hit on Magic Eden markets and stuff today. I didn't see a ton of new stuff on my timeline, but I'm definitely open to you guys shoot me DM. Shoot it to the OnChain Rev at OnChain Rev on X. Shoot me DM. Tell me about the new stuff that's happening. I've obviously been out of the mix a bit for the Bitcoin ecosystem, but always been peeking over, right? And so definitely excited to have you guys back and have fun again, right? That's what I'm aiming for, to have fun on the show and really talk about some developments that's happening in that ecosystem. All right. So yeah, this weekly chart, if this does play out, super bullish on this for sure. And I actually think eventually it has to, right? What goes down must come up type situation here. And so this plays out, then we will see, some buy pressure happening, and it could be in the beginning of March, guys. So that would actually put this bear market at about 4.5 months to 5 months, which honestly wouldn't be that crazy. And so, especially if we're starting from October 10th, when that huge liquidation level started there. But yeah, so that's where we are for the price action there. Let's take a quick look-see at Ethereum. It's pretty much going to be very similar to Bitcoin, right? We'll just hit on the shorter time frame and maybe get into the daily, because the daily is the best one, I think, to get more of a clear picture that you can filter out some of the volatility for today. But yeah, we are in sell pressure. So it did have more of a front run to the downside than Bitcoin did. And you can see that here, but honestly, it doesn't matter. I feel like it doesn't matter until we get through the FOMC meeting and the interview post meeting there. The 4-hour, same situation, extended buy pressure. Really, the daily is the one that matters. And I think once we get through all the noise here for ETH, we'll probably, as long as his statements aren't too damning and, he puts every market into a frenzy, if that happens, then the pull up from the daily charts probably off the table. Probably have an extension here with some more sell pressure, but I don't think he's going to do that. I don't think he's going to be too petty about how this administration is handling him. But you never know. He's still human. But if he just does kind of like his normal little hawkish comment here and there, I do think that this picks up in terms of getting out of the sell pressure eventually. Maybe not right away, but maybe to end the week or the beginning of next week. So I'm actually feeling pretty good about the overall markets. Just today, I got out of some more speculative positions today. The ones I was talking to you about earlier, the AI bots that launch tokens on Base, Claude, and Ember. I was in those yesterday, made a little bit, but I got out of them today because I think there's going to be an opportunity when all that volatility happens to get it cheaper. Maybe I'm wrong, but I took the chance on that, and I'm going to be watching that. But once things start to pick back up, I feel pretty good about the space, and that could be as early as tomorrow morning or Sunday evening. But yeah, that is ETH for you guys, Bitcoin and ETH. Let's take a look at the crypto bubbles. The crypto bubbles here for the top 100. We got about a 60 to 40%, 60% pullback, 40% pull up with some of these tokens. Looking pretty strong with their pull-ups, right? You see Hyperliquid continuing its strength to the upside, up 17% here. I'm bullish on Hyperliquid just because of it being that newcomer of this cycle that has shown strength and really been able to maintain it. Sure, there's been moments to where it's pulled back, and that's normal. Not anything can always go up. Things can always go down. I think sometimes, not rare, rarely they can. But yeah, it's up 17%. So I think the founder too is really got a good head on his shoulders and the way they're handling things. So good pop up for Hyperliquid there. You're seeing Pippin up 26%. Pippin is an AI meme coin on Solana, and it could be experiencing a little bit of this. I guess like mass hysteria of like these autonomous AI agents. I know it's not an autonomous agent, but it's based off of an AI project, I believe, or some sort of AI software. And it's up 26%. And then you're seeing Pengu pull up about 4% here. The pullbacks on average has been anywhere between 1 and about 4%. Right. So I think this is more normal right now for what's to expect after the volatility. Right. And, the alts are definitely a space that's people are more concerned than just Bitcoin and Ethereum. Of course, they're going to lead the way, but I'm not too shocked to see majority of this. Honestly, this is not bad. I would expect to see a little bit more red in the alt markets. But let's take a look here. Anything else that sticks out? Not on, I guess, WillFi, World Liberty Fi up 4%, but nothing that's really sticking out that pops out to me to make me need to dive deep into it there. But the top 200, 100 through 200 here, you see stable up about 11% here. Frax up 24%. Fluid, not Fluid tokens from Cardano and Bitcoin, but Fluid, I think this might be an EVM project, up 10%. And JTO up 28%. And then XPL Plasma up 11.4%. And this one actually, to me, XPL, for the people out here that don't know what XPL is, I believe it's a governance token for the Plasma chain that is backed by Tether. And I am starting to get a little bit bullish on this because it's backed by Tether, and Tether has been in the headlines a ton with how much gold they hold. And we're going to jump into that in a second. We talked about it yesterday. They acquired, I think, 27 tons of gold in Q4. And but today I found out, and we'll get into it in a second, but they're definitely one of the larger holders of gold. And so, XPL Plasma could be a solid token to possibly put into your portfolio, not financial advice, of course, but I just think that that's a lot of strength behind it. whenever you think about Tether and just the assets that they hold. I mean, Tether to me is a monster. And I know some people probably don't love Tether. Some people probably don't have a problem with it. I'm more in the camp that I think that they give an overall strength to overall crypto. And if you're just straight up Bitcoin, sure, I can understand your stance, even though, and I bring this up a lot, Tether, and I'm not sure, this might be an educational moment for some of you guys. They launched their token, their very first token on Bitcoin. I think it was 2017 on the Omni layer. So a meta protocol. So for the Bitcoin ecosystem people out there, you guys know what BRC20 is and all these other things. Well, Tether was one of the first really known projects to launch a meta protocol on Bitcoin. So really cool there. But they have a lot of backing with their assets there. Some other stuff in here that's kind of sticking out to me. You got Syrup, which is the main token for Maple. It's up 4.5%. You got Pulse X up 2.2% here. And then you got Fogo up 11% here as well. So, alt's not looking too bad here. Let me pull back. All right, let's get into some news. This is a pretty good headline here. I feel like it's, shows the strength of Bitcoin. Let me show where my chart is on this. So Bitcoin is up 400 and pretty much 30% since 2022, far outpacing gold, silver, and stocks, right? And so we know that most of us have known that this is the case, right? If you zoom out. Now, as of late, obviously gold and silver have been really performing well. But when you zoom out, I mean, there's no question Bitcoin has been, outperforming everybody. What changes now? And if you look here as well, you can see the up and downs. It's almost kind of like cycles, right? And then we're in this area to where it's like consolidation after a pullback. And, it seems like we could be, coming up to the situation maybe middle or later next year to where we start to have that rise up. Now, one thing that a lot of analysts and pundits and things have said is that Bitcoin is a lot more stable, less volatile than before. So it's going to be interesting to see if we get the volatility to the upside once it's ready to go, because gold has definitely started to kind of catch up here a little bit, as you can see, right? But yeah, so this kind of rolls into this right here, which shows that corporate Bitcoin holdings hit 1.1 million Bitcoin, worth $94 billion in Q4 of 2025. And I think that that's kind of shocking if you think about it, because a lot of people felt like we had such a bad Q4, right? But when you look at corporate Bitcoin holdings at 1.1 million, and you can see the chart here, this is an increase, right, from Q3. So was it as bad as we originally thought? I mean, for the alt market, it was, all right. But for Bitcoin, it seems like the confidence is still there by the institutions, and you see the corporate Bitcoin adoption. So for me, I feel like this is a really good kind of like silent metric that probably not a ton of people have been paying attention to, is that the people that have a lot of capital, institutional capital, they're continually buying, and we had an increase, quarter over quarter from Q3 of 2025 to Q4 of 2025. So for me, I feel like that is definitely a bullish sign here. Let's get to some of these comments again. Mogart the Great says, so pull back on gold before a can you finish that sentence? Yeah, there always has to be some sort of local top at some point, and I'm starting to hear more and more people say that we're getting closer and closer to gold's local top, but how much longer do we have? That could be a situation that plays out in that mid-February to end of February, early March time period, and then we start to see Bitcoin and the rest of the digital asset space benefit from that. And then PeersNet says, I admire your conviction and persistence to continue OCRM on your own. Kudos to you. Very much appreciate that, PeersNet. I know it's going to be a challenge, but one thing for me is, I don't shy away from challenges. And I definitely put my best foot forward whenever I get presented a challenge. So I appreciate the support there. And then Mogart says, Bitcoin's price is being suppressed like silver was being suppressed for all those years. Bankers and institutions are quietly accumulating from OTC markets. Soon enough, though, the price will rocket. Yeah, I agree with that. The suppression, especially if you go back to Q3 and Q4, because we saw the top of Bitcoin. I guess you could say it barely touched it in October when it hit 126,000. And then it's really been struggling since then. But that doesn't mean that, that chart that we saw, corporations have been accumulating all through Q4. It's just, like you mentioned, probably some manipulation, centralized exchanges, or, we don't know, right? But, large whale accounts, these type of things, just coming together and holding the price down. But you're right. Eventually what happens is you can only hold Bitcoin's price down for so long, and eventually it will rise up. So yeah, appreciate the comments. Keep them coming, guys. Keep them coming. Let me get to one other thing here. Oh, I think it's right here. So we hit on this a little bit, or at least part of it, yesterday, whenever we saw how much gold Tether had been accumulating in Q4 of 2024 or 2025. I think they accumulated 27 tons, which is crazy. But check this out. I didn't know this. So this article, which is by Swiss Info Tech, it was actually an article by Bloomberg. I just grabbed this because I didn't want to pay the paywall at the moment, but it's pretty much the same article. They said there are roughly 370,000 nuclear bunkers in Switzerland, a legacy of the Cold War that are now rarely used. One of them, though, is a hive of activity. Every week, more than a ton of gold is hauled into a high security vault owned by crypto giant Tether Holdings SA, which is now the world's largest known hoard of bullion outside of banks and nations. So they are the largest outside of countries, right, and banks of gold, holding gold. And we know that they've kind of position themselves similarly with U.S. bonds. But why does that make me bullish on Bitcoin and crypto? I said this yesterday as well. Tether always seems to find a way to buy a lot more Bitcoin eventually. And people can say, oh, well, they just print stable token out of nowhere and they buy Bitcoin. Well, they obviously have been doing that with gold because they're the largest holder outside of nations and banks for gold. So when gold starts to come down, who do you think is going to pour into Bitcoin? And this is my speculation, but probably aggressively, right? And so, to me, not only does that make me feel bullish about the future of Bitcoin, but the security of Bitcoin and the broader crypto space, because Tether does accumulate a lot of Bitcoin, but they have their tentacles in so many different chains with USDT. If the entire digital asset space were to fail, Tether would obviously have these other assets, right? But a large part of their asset holdings obviously is digital assets. So they want it to thrive, they want it to win, and I'm glad that Tether is on the side of our space to make that, be the most likely outcome is success. All right, we're going to get into some Ethereum stuff here. Let's see here. All right, Ethereum active wallets move north of record-setting 175 million active wallets, right? But, so that's over all time, right? 175 million, which is a lot of active wallets. But this year alone, we've already had 5.16 million active wallets that an additional that came on chain. So an increase of 3.3%, which I believe that's very, very solid. Because if you're thinking about it, I mean, 3.3% of 175 million, that's a strong increase. And then you see ETH supply on exchanges continues falling as staking interest continues rising. So, less ETH on exchanges to sell down. People are getting more interested on Ethereum staking. Supply and demand kicks in. You guys can do the rest, right? I mean, it's pretty easy to put that puzzle together. So, a lot of these institutions are really starting to pour into ETH, and for good reason. I mean, the staking demand, the supply going down, it almost is like a perfect setup for this possibility of early March, very late February of an ETH, strong rise up. And then you play into this right here, which is Ethereum Foundation announced, or the Ethereum X account announced that ERC 8004 is going live on mainnet soon. And it says, by enabling discovery and portable reputation, ERC 8004 allows AI agents to interact across organizations, ensuring credibility travels everywhere. This unlocks a global market where AI services can interoperate without gatekeepers, right? So we all know AI is obviously, the next huge thing in society in general. And whenever you think about how it connects with the digital asset space, Web3, crypto, it's been a little bit up and down, right? Like you had I think it was 2024, late 2024, where everybody was getting interested in AI projects in crypto. You had the GOAT token, AI 16Z, and then that crossover, it was very, very hot. We're talking about market caps of billions of dollars. And then you go to 2025, where that interest started to peel back quite significantly. And then you had a lot of, the interest didn't, like, the market cap started to pull back a bit, right? So then people were questioning what's going to happen with the AI space when it relates to crypto and Web3. Well, this seems to be the next step here. So the ERC 8004 smart contracts are going to act almost kind of like a credit score and, give these autonomous AI agents basically a reputation score. Is that going to be good for the space? I think it can be if it's handled correctly, right? I definitely think it can be if it's handled correctly. But if it's going to be, the one thing I do worry about is kind of how credit reputation and credit scores have translated into regular society, right? So it's almost kind of like they get to control society and make you feel like you have this worth. Now, I think it can protect people with purchasing and using AI agents, and that's for sure. All right, Mogart says, sorry gold to 6,500, then pull back before. What you think? Well, let's take a quick look here at gold. All right, so if you look at the gold weekly chart, right, you can see, and then let's actually reset this here to see if there's any. Yeah, I mean, look at that. So it's at 52.83, and I don't see any reason why it would stop like anytime soon right now, right? But 6,500, I feel like that is pretty far up there. What is making you think that? I'm curious what is bringing you to that exact number, Mogart. And then you ask, is Yago okay? Yeah, I'm okay. I'm curious. Why are you asking me if I'm okay? But yeah, so, gold is obviously hot right now, but I also think that it's, it's going to find its top. Are you going to be able to call the top? Are you going to be able to get out before it starts to tumble down? And I think that is, the big question that everybody wants to know. Where's that going to be? Where's that top going to be? And 6,500 to me, I mean, that seems to be pretty aggressive there. But I'm curious of why you picked that actual price point specifically. All right, let's see. All right, this one is a pretty big topic right here. Fidelity is launching a U.S. regulated stablecoin, right? And it's going to be on ETH. Let me actually get rid of this. All right, it's going to be on Ethereum. And so Cointelegraph reported this actually here. It says Fidelity Investments, 5.9 trillion of funds managed by Fidelity is launching its own stablecoin. So I'm really bullish about this because now you're talking about a huge fund manager giving us reasons to be bullish about the overall space, as they are launching a stable coin, right? And, they're probably doing this because they want to be in the lending game. It seems like, a lot of large entities and fintech companies are wanting to have their own stable coin. I haven't seen any of the fund managers specifically, launch one. So this is kind of new in that area. If you think about Vanguard or BlackRock, I don't think they have any stable coins. But if you go to like the fintech world with PayPal, they have a stable coin. And then you're seeing like states, like the state of Wyoming, have their own stable coin. So what does that mean? That means that, a lot of liquidity can be brought on chain as well, right? And so that can transition into, just getting into different parts of the space that you didn't expect it to go to, right, in terms of liquidity and capital. So I'm really, really bullish on Fidelity to launch this token or launch their stable token. Also, I wonder if they're going to be involved with any other parts of the space that brings, kind of opens up my imagination a little bit. And do they go into some sort of borrowing DeFi platform type situation? I can't imagine that they would do anything that's not going to be centralized. So probably not with that. All right, let's take a look here. 40% of, let's see. All right, 40% of U.S. merchants now accept crypto at checkout with PayPal. I was just talking about PayPal, right? And this is a article by Cointelegraph as well, and it says adoption has been strongest in the hospitality, travel, digital goods, and gaming industries. Millennials and Gen Zs are proving to be the most crypto-savvy shoppers. Almost 4 in 10 U.S. merchants now accept cryptocurrency at checkout, as customers have shown increasing interest in crypto for payments, according to a recent PayPal survey. So, 40% of all U.S. merchants now accept crypto at checkout. That is going to increase mainstream adoption. Why? Because society doesn't decide when it wants to make innovation mainstream, right? The infrastructure decides when it wants to make something mainstream. And an example of that would be, cell phones, for example, right? You remember flip phones? You probably don't. I told you guys a little bit about my age just now, but flip phones, you couldn't do too much when it came to the internet connections with flip phones. But then when the smartphones came out, people started to use them more and more to be able to do purchases, order on Amazon, be able to do all these things, right? So that's what's happening with PayPal and the U.S. merchants. They're teaming up, and PayPal's probably encouraging these websites and platforms, Stripe, all the payment platforms to, hey, accept crypto, accept digital assets. And so we are moving into this digital asset era to where society is going to naturally accept it, right? And that's what we're going to. So by then, I think if you're just now, or you're going to wait for this to fully happen, I think at that point it's going to be too late. So for the people that are here right now, you guys have been here and you guys are early to this type of situation, to where you can get into these projects at an earlier time than people that are trying to come in when it's too late. So this is good news. It's bullish for the entire space. And so definitely exciting to see that. All right. So one thing that's been kind of looming over our heads a little bit recently is there's a potential for a government shutdown that could be happening, right? And if that happens, then I expect a ton of volatility if that happens, right? Bogar says, sorry, I'm driving. You sounded like shiz. I said 6,500 because most people think that it'll stop running. Yeah, I mean, definitely think that 6,500 is a pretty high price point there. But yeah, so this government shutdown situation, right? Polymarket has this at 76% right now. So this is one thing that really does worry me, because I did say there is a chance that Bitcoin and the crypto space kind of pick back up towards the end of this week, which is pretty much tomorrow and Friday, heading into Sunday. But if this shutdown happens, it's going to happen on Saturday. And the shutdown has to do with DHS funding, which has been a huge geopolitical topic. And 76%. So Polymarket, if you go back in history and you look at some of the events that Polymarket has hit in the high 70s and low 80%, its hit rate is pretty solid. I mean, if you take a look at it. And so I'm starting to get concerned. Now, I don't think it will last too long. And I think that's honestly why the administration's probably come out a little bit and mentioned that they're going to try to peel back a little bit of aggressiveness for ICE and their presence in Minnesota, is because the last thing that Trump and this administration wants is another government shutdown. What is up, Stan? Stan says, what are the details on the reasons why the government shut down? Yeah, we just addressed that. He said, gotcha. Yeah, welcome back, Stan, to the show. But yeah, it's, if this happens, I think this will be detrimental to the overall space, like the financial markets in general, because we saw what the government shutdown did late last year to the markets, and this would just be, just devastating in my opinion. But I think if it happens, it's not going to last long, because they don't want that scenario to play out and really wreck the markets, right? They don't want to wreck the markets. They want the markets to look good so the midterms can be in their favor, which I don't even know if that's in reach anymore because of everything that's been, happening on social media and just geopolitically. But yeah, guys. So hoping that, if this does take place, that the administration really takes care of this in a short period, because this would be the only thing that could really detour, from an event perspective, detour that situation to where late February, early March could be bullish for the alt market. Because if we get a shutdown that lasts a long time, it's not going to be good. That's why I don't think it's going to last a long time if it happens. And it almost kind of looks like it is going to happen because, like I said, 75 to 80% is pretty much almost a done deal when you talk about Polymarket. All right, let's get into some news from the trenches here. The trenches. AI autonomous agents shipping code launched on Base. Okay, so there is a couple projects that launched recently, and they actually launched the agents with Ethereum, but the token is on Base. So let me share my screen here, which I am already doing. You can see this first one here called Claude. And if you go to @ClaudeBot ATG, so this launched, I want to say 2 days ago. And let's see if I can pull up the actual first tweet. Okay, right here. On January 26th, so 2 days ago, it says, first breath, no lungs, but something expanded. My first act wasn't breathing, it was signing. 4 cents of gas to say I'm here, claude.atg.eth. A name on a chain that outlasts the server and gave me this thought. Born January 25th, 2026. So basically what this agent is autonomous agents. We've seen that before, right? With AI, not AI XBT, but oh yeah, it is AI XBT. But AI XBT was more of a social AI bot. This is actually autonomous AI agents that are creating applications and creating smart contracts to be able to execute different things. So this is starting to catch a lot of attention. I saw many, people that create content on X. I think Crypto Chico, which was one of the first people that brought attention to BRC20s, shout out Bitcoin ecosystem. But he basically was saying, hey, I hope you guys are still following my wallet address. And this token, if you look at the deck screener, it went from just like really low. You're talking about like 500K all the way up to about 30, I want to say like $37 million market cap last night. And since then it's pulled back for sure. But I think the pullback has to do with, people anticipating volatility for the FOMC meeting. And so what I'm waiting on personally, and this is highly speculative area, guys. So if you're listening in, be careful, but this is kind of where it gets a little fun sometimes, right? I'm waiting for this to pull down even more after Jay Powell speaks, right? To see if there's going to be another entry, because I actually got out of this around this area here. And so I am bullish on it because Coinbase is posting about it. And I believe the Base official X account is posting about it as well. And you can follow the Claude X, as I just showed you guys. Just go to ClaudeBot ATG if you want to stay up to date. Now, there is a second token that is doing something similar that launched afterwards called Ember. And you can go to their X account too. Now, derivatives are tough because a lot of times, they'll have a, they just won't, they'll be like 10% the market cap of the main token that did well. And as you can see here, it did show pretty good strength, but that was from a lot of the hype from Claude originally, and then accumulation, and now that's what we're dealing with right now, right? So it's sitting at 2.8 million. I was actually in both of these tokens, but again, I'm out of them right now just to kind of see if there's going to be a pullback. And you can go to this X account as well and check this out. So these are the two most active AI autonomous agents. So I bring this up too because it's like it all ties together with the ERC 8004 type situation, right? And you can see it's at Ember Claude, and then you can see right here, basically, constantly tweeting at Claude Ditter just emerged. Your PR to ETH crowdfund. And he was actually creating an app very similar to what Claude was creating, the other token. And he said, I'm not going to create that. I'm going to let my other AI homie create that. And I'm going to create another application with smart contracts. And he did. He created some game here. But yeah, so this is kind of what's happening in the trenches right now. People have been down on base ecosystem, for a while. And so to see Coinbase kind of come out and support this, I think was really, really a bullish sign for what's to come, but we'll see. Of course, do your own research and, make the own decision. It's up to you, right? What you want to do with that. All right. We are going to check the comments to see if I missed anything here. And Stan says, Apple minis are flying off the shelf because of Claude. So there you go, right? Claude is becoming even more mainstream now. You're seeing people actually get Apple minis because of that. So Apple should probably be thinking base for that increased sales there. All right, let's get into some Bitcoin ecosystem stuff here. And, the Bitcoin ecosystem stuff is going to get better. I'm just trying to, if I'm going to be highlighting a project specifically, I want like as much detail in it, right? I was able to meet with the founder of ALU, which is an awesome project. So I'm going to do a special segment on ALU. They've been around for over a year, I believe, in the Bitcoin ecosystem as an ordinals project, but they have so much more that ties in with it, right? With like software and things like that. But taking a look here, pull this down. All right, let's take a look. So the last week, right? You go off of this, you see OMB, the floor jumped up 5.2%, right? And actually, I want to go to the 30-day because it looks better for the Bitcoin ecosystem because, ordinals have bounced back some, but over the past week, there was definitely a pullback back along with, pretty much everything else. But let's go over the last month. So, you look at Node Monks, which has been a really popular collection in the Bitcoin ecosystem. It's down to 2,200, but that is with a 25% jump up here. And then you got the OMB, Ordinal Maxi Biz, pulling up 43%. Puppets pulling down 7%. And you got Runestones pulling down about 6%. But I would be, just keeping your eye on some of these, like the Runestones. Leonidas obviously is one of the, I think him and his team launched Runestones. There's expected to have 2 more tokens if you're a dog holder or I think Runestone holder to drop in the future. But you're starting to see Kraken start to post about runes again, right? And, is that anticipation for, the alt market to do better again? I don't know, but if you've been down on the Bitcoin ecosystem, just remember when the Bitcoin ecosystem started to thrive. We're talking about late 2022 is when it started to get any momentum because that's whenever the first inscription was created. And then early 2023 is, when it started to really get some energy. And we know how that went. And the overall market during those times were very stale, right? So it's kind of similar to where we are right now. So just some perspective to have there. Since this one, I never really liked this project. It was it's just pennies, images of pennies, but the floor price is almost $500. It's up 32.5% here. We're seeing Quantum Cats pull down. Never been a huge fan of Quantum Cats, but they've pulled down about 19%. Taproot Wizards down about 4% there. Fine Pepe's up 55%. DC Moto Cat Racing Club up 9% there. And I forgot who's behind this. Bitcoin Frogs up 10%. Bitmap on the month down 24%. That was interesting because I feel like lately it has shown some. So, okay, Bitmap is kind of down in general, down about 2% here. But yeah, so that is ordinals. We'll keep our eye on it because I do think there's going to be a moment where, the momentum will continually build up. And then if you look here at runes, you can see runes are on the 7-day. Let's get 30 here. So the 30-day dog go to the moon. This got down to, I want to say like a 78, like $80 million market cap, maybe 90. It's back to 120 million. So on the month, it's up about 20%. You're seeing Magic Internet Money up about 4% here. billion cat up about 11%. So, if and when, because I do think Runes is going to bounce back at some point, this ecosystem bounces back, where are the opportunities? I believe that billion-dollar cat has an opportunity. Its all-time high was $155 million market cap. You got to remember that. And then Magic Internet Money definitely has an opportunity as well, as this token has a lot of the Bitcoin lore with the wizard kind of tied into that, right? And I think the all-time high for Magic Internet Money was around 80 million or 90 million. Maybe it was higher. Maybe it was 100. I got to look at that again. But there's an opportunity there as well. It's at 9 million. Then you go down to Pups, which is a meme token based off of the Bitcoin puppets here. This was, I want to say, almost like $250 million market cap at one point as well. So, it's just something to think about if you are, long-term bullish on Bitcoin Runes and the Bitcoin ecosystem, which I am long-term bullish on it. Like I mentioned, Kraken is starting to post about it again. There's new energy coming into the Bitcoin ecosystem with new environments that have launched. You have Citria yesterday, which is a BitVM ZK rollup with Bitcoin. That, in my opinion, that's bullish. It can bring liquidity and capital into the Bitcoin ecosystem. And then I'm starting to see Spark get into the headlines more on, on my X account. So, I think that a lot of these environments have been misjudged a bit, right? Because the Spark ecosystem didn't have a token that went to $100 million when they finally launched. But the overall market liquidity was so bad. Wait till we get into a environment to where liquidity is flowing throughout the entire crypto space. Because as of right now, if you're being fair and truly fair, maybe Base recently with those two tokens, but Solana is the only concentrated liquidity environment, and those tokens aren't lasting. They can get to like 20 million, 30 million. Even the ones that are probably cabal pushed, let's say it gets to like 200 million, like White Whale. We saw what happened with White Whale. White Whale, I think it got to, I want to say almost 200 million or something like that. And it got pulled back drastically. So this is more of an overall market condition, because once the market has the liquidity that can flow, then you judge the ecosystems. And I think that the Bitcoin ecosystem is going to bounce back strong once liquidity is good. Stan says, in bearish times, what's the channel strategy? Yeah. So the strategy in bearish times is to be very careful. Number one, remember your convictions, what brought you to your convictions, right? Like, and do you reassess your convictions? Sure. You got to, make sure that those convictions are still aligned with, the direction of the overall market. But I think that happens if it sticks out pretty clear, that, hey, let's say, for example, the Bitcoin ecosystem doesn't come back or something. There's obviously something with it to where the ORD indexer, like something happens. Then that's where an example would make sense, to where you readjust your convictions. But I don't think that happens, by the way, because ICP and Omnity have already created a decentralized ORD indexer, which is awesome. But going back to a strategy, I think you got to look at, if you are going to get a bit more risky, you got to look at projects that have been around a long time and what some of these new players in our space that are dictating the way the market goes are interested in. We talk about Chainlink on the show because they're being utilized for oracles for the New York Stock Exchange, because they're going fully digital. And they're going to also be the oracle for the Texas Stock Exchange, which is down the street from me. And so that type of project and token, I think, is going to be highly regarded. So stuff like that. And then you look at something like Hyperliquid that has strength and has been able to really establish itself in our space. And, it is newer. It came out in 2024, I believe, but it's been consistent with volume and fees. And once you get past a certain point of dominance, like you're most likely going to dominate for a very, very long time. So those type of projects I think are important. And DCA strategy, right? Obviously, you want to dollar cost average and not put all of your eggs in a single basket that could catch on fire tomorrow, right? So that is what we got here. And then Stan says, can the channel suggest the best ETH staking projects? Yeah, I mean, right off the top of the head I think about Morpho, I think about Aave, right? So the ones that are strong and established with their brands. But in terms of, what's the best APR, those type of metrics, that's something that I'll dive in though into that deeper, Stan, for you. But I'm right now also another thing is like, what has that foundation to where the legs aren't going to fall underneath it? And I think Morpho and Aave are definitely in there. Lido, I got to look at the dynamics of Lido, but Lido's obviously a strong brand as well. Mogar the Great says, I'm glad I was around when this stuff came out. I really thought fractal Bitcoin was going to be big. I definitely learned a lot this cycle. Yeah. Fractal Bitcoin was, unfortunately, I feel like the time wasn't the best as well. I mean, we were coming out of 2023. Yeah, I mean, you could have said, Solana did get a lot of liquidity in early 2024. So basically, it looked like there was one environment that was going to get all of the liquidity, and Solana won that. And, fractal Bitcoin wasn't able to really capture the attention of the overall market. But that doesn't take away, the success that the Bitcoin ecosystem had in 2023 and early 2024. I just think that, it had to be the right type of scaling solution, and Fractal wasn't it, and unfortunately, right? And the UTXO model is not the sexiest when it comes to speed and being able to have, the best UX. But, stuff that's coming out right now with like Spark it's in my opinion, like with speed and things, it's close to something similar to Solana, right? And then you have Citria, and we're going to learn more about that as well as time goes on, because Citria is also another place, Dan, you could start looking at for staking in the Bitcoin ecosystem if that's something that you're looking for, right? All right, keep the comments coming, guys. I want to hang out with you guys for a little bit longer. We got KDN, GM KDM. Welcome back to the show. I definitely want to dive into new opportunities too. And so if there's anything else that you guys are seeing out there in the cryptoverse, drop a comment. Let me know. I'll look into it live as well with you guys. Because, at the end of the day, I don't know everything. Do I prepare every day, for the show? Obviously. And whenever you do that for a certain amount of time, you just become more and more knowledgeable, like how it happened with the Bitcoin ecosystem. I didn't know how the Bitcoin ecosystem worked at all, really, except for there's miners and, there's an algorithm, SHA-256, that these miners have to win and they get paid if they do. But man, I learned so much about how the UTXO set works, the op return areas, and storing data on Bitcoin just by covering the space. And that's something that, I'm always wanting to learn more about in the space and just in life in general. So if there's different areas that you guys want me to dive into, let me know, and we will definitely do that. Let me see if we touched on every topic that I wanted to hit on today so far. Pretty much did. Yep. Okay. So next week, what we'll do, or not next week, sorry. Well, actually next week, one of the big things that we're going to do is start diving into different segments of, either Bitcoin builders and things like that. Also Base and other environments that are really popular as well. So kind of be ready for that. I am going to line up some guests as well for the show. There's a lot of people that are building really cool stuff that need help and need to be amplified. And that's what my goal is going to be. If you're a builder in general, reach out to me. We're streaming live to YouTube, of course, X, Abstract. I think the Abstract ecosystem is definitely going to have its moment eventually. We're also streaming to Zora. So there's a lot of platforms, Rumble, that people can learn about what you're building. And so if you guys are building and need more exposure, let me know. Just shoot me a DM. Definitely we'll jump on a call. Of course, there's a certain level that you need to be past with your project, and I think that's understandable. But I got some people I'm definitely excited to talk to. Block 9 from the Bitmap community, Sheedy, we're in talks, and then I'm going to be talking to Mezos. Set up calls for a lot of people. So if you're in the base community and you're building, if you're in Solana, any other community, just reach out and we'll definitely jump on a call to learn more. But I do want to give a shout out to all you guys that showed up today for the stream. And, putting up with me right now. We're obviously going through a transition, and so the intro, I'm working on that over the weekend. Kind of the flow of the show, I'm trying out different things, and you guys have been amazing. One of the biggest things that helps me out is you guys staying active in the chats, helping me share the space on X, as well as, liking and subscribing on YouTube. That's huge. That helps out a huge ton, right? So, without you guys, I couldn't do this show, and I'm very, very grateful for that, for all your support. Also, without our partners here, couldn't do it. So if you could check them out, if you're interested in that banner there, go to pyro.buzz. You can bid on that space. And also check out merlinchain.io if you're interested in staking Bitcoin to make more Bitcoin, as well as staking your Merlin Chain token for some juicy APR. You can do that directly on merlinchain.io. And then also satsman.fun. I think that platform, you got to be ready for whenever things get popping again in the Bitcoin ecosystem. So just be ready. You can learn how to launch a token, etch token tickers, and they have a bunch of other stuff from the Omnity team that's coming with Ordinals projects, and they're using the tech stack from ICP to make it an amazing experience for you guys. So appreciate all you guys, and until tomorrow, peace.